Welcome to the Domestic Draft Podcast. I'm Evan Bierman here with Dan Slowick. Dan, we're continuing our coverage of the Chicago Bears offseason. It's been an exciting one, as usual, as the last couple of years have been too. But why don't you kick it off first? Tell us what you're drinking.
I have a collaboration of two San Diego breweries here. It's Harlan Brewing Company and Bergeon Beer Company. Bergeon up in Carlsbad, and Harlan is here, centric in San Diego. Interesting story about Harlan. They got a pretty good past. The two founders, one of the founders founded a beer company called St. Archer. And St. Archer was like super popular in San Diego around 2015. Yeah. And they ended up getting bought by Molson Coors. So they got bought out. This guy sold his company. They actually ran with the Super Bowl coming up. I think it was like 2020. They ran a Super Bowl commercial. It was like big news around here. It showcased like San Diego. Yeah, he's like skateboarding and, San Diego airports in the background. Well, they shut down all operations. Anyways, Molson Coors bought them, shut down their ops. It just wasn't doing well. But the previous owner who sold it started his own brewery called Harlan. So that's what Harlan is. It's that guy and his partner. They went ahead and started Harlan Brewing Company, and they're doing really well. They're just, they're focusing on kind of local, really good flavors. I'm drinking a collaboration, like I said, with the Carlsbad, the little North County neighborhood here in San Diego called Bergeon, and it's called Magic Window. It's a West Coast IPA. I kind of went into the store too. I went into their tap room and I was just asking, like, what can I not find on the local corner store, like shelf? Do you guys have any things that are a little more unique you do like brew on site? So he recommended this one to me. It's got a 3.7 on Untapped, 6.8 alcohol. And he kind of described it to me as it's a really good hazy and it's got a little citrus to it. So I like it. Seems pretty good. Yeah, that's it, man. Former nice. St. Archer brewer, sold it, probably made a ton of money, and then was able to kind of focus in and do a little more passion project and stay local. So good for him supporting. What about you?
Yeah, I love it. I'm doing a, pretty big name in the Chicago craft brewery scene. It's Half Acre Brewing. Half Acre started back in 2008 in Chicago, kicked off as a small brew pub, quickly made a name for themselves. Just one of those breweries that got in, I think, at the right time, just hit the market and really went hoppy right off the bat. And that was just what everybody was looking for at that time. So they had a knack for combining those bold flavors, experimenting with different styles. And like I said, it was just the right time. This is the Waybird. It's a hazy IPA. It's got tropical and pine notes. It's 6.5%, gets a 3.84 on Untapped. And they say the name Waybird actually ties into the feeling the beer's meant to evoke. It's a name they say captures the light, free-spirited vibe of the beer itself. I can attest to that. It's pretty solid. It's kind of light, but you also get that hoppy flavor in there. It's definitely a Half Acre beer, though. I feel like, some of these breweries, you have a sip of it. Hot Butcher is one that I always think of, too. You have a sip of that, it's a Hot Butcher beer. And that's what this beer is for me. But I got the orange can. I got the blue shirt. We're covering the Bears again today. We got our guy, Herb Howard, back on the show. Herb, we're so happy that you can come back. If you haven't followed Herb, follow him on Twitter at HerbHoward411. He's a Chicago Bears beat reporter for the Bigs. He's a co-host of Herb and 2 podcast, radio personality at WVON on iHeartRadio. He's been on CHGO. He's been all over the place. He's also recently, Chicago Sun-Times released their 5th annual Chicago Sports Media Power Rankings, and Herb made the list. Herb, why don't we kick it off with that? Let us know how you're feeling about that.
You know what, man? It's cool, right? So I'm not. It's not really, why I do it or anything like that. But I must admit, it was really, really cool to be recognized and just, have some recognition and some respect amongst your peers. And my friends and family made a much bigger deal about it than I did. I had people even all the way out on the West Coast, like just texting my phone, like, you don't even get the Sun-Times. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? So that was super cool. So yeah, I thought that was cool to be mentioned on such list with a lot of people I respect. You had, Lawrence Holmes, Jason Goff, and Adam Amin was number 1 on the list. And so, it was just a cool list to be a part of. It was.
Was it a complete surprise, or did they tell you beforehand that you were going to be in it?
No, I had no idea. I think somebody sent it to me on Twitter. I think Jason Leisure. No, I think I seen it right before Jason Leisure from the Sun-Times sent it to me. But somebody sent it to me, and then I went about reading it. And lo and behold, saw my name listed, and I was like, oh, that's really, really cool, man. So like I said, not the why that I do it, but certainly cool to get that recognition. I was appreciative for sure.
Yeah, congratulations, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Thank you. For real.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like I said, you're all over the place lately. We talked to you a while back. I feel like it's been a little bit, but you've always been so gracious with your time coming on our show. So again, we appreciate it.
I think let me drink when I come on y'all show.
Yeah, man.
There we go. That's
we're one of the only
entitled.
shows that can do that. Yeah. What are you drinking, by the way?
Well, I may or may not have a cocktail off to the side, but I also got Moore's Beer. It's a brewing company here in Chicago. It's a Black-owned brand. Good people, man. Friends of mine that I've been cool with for a while, and so I actually got their head on too, which works perfect. Hopping on here with y'all. But Moore's Brewing Company. This is their session ale. It's 5.4 alcohol, and they actually have a depending on when people are able to watch this on February 1st. I think they're doing a grand opening. They're opening a new brewery, which I don't have the full information for. I should, considering I was coming on here with you guys, but I'll try to pull it up maybe before we get done here. But they've collaborated with another brewing company here in Chicago, and they're opening up a brand new spot up north here in Chicago. So shout out to Moore's Brewing Company, man. Always great products and great people for real.
Check them out. Their social media is at Moore's Beer. So if you're looking for that information, you'll probably be able to find it there.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So, like I said, you got a lot going on. What's a day in the life of Herb Howard look like these days?
Ev, it was cool for a while. It was kind of in that period where you're like, okay, the season's over. You're probably going to get a little bit of downtime from, the Bears day-to-day stuff. But you know how like when you sleep, but your alarm is finna go off soon. Like you can't really get like deep into sleep because
you got one eye open almost.
That kind of sleep, right? I was waiting because you knew that the head coaching news would drop sooner or later, and so you kind of like, I'm off, but I'm not off. I'm still kind of on, waiting around to see what's going on. You're talking to different sources and things like that, and then boom, the Lions lose, and less than 48 hours later, Ben Johnson is at Hallis Hall, and so that part of it has been really, really cool. I think the NFL has done a really good job of making the NFL calendar a 12-month thing, right? So it used to be like this huge offseason thing, and now it's not really. You got regular season rolls right into postseason, and then you get, the coaches firing and hiring cycle coming through, leading you right up into the Super Bowl, and then now you got like Senior Bowl, East-West Shrine Game. You come out of there, you get the combine, you get into free agency and the draft and rookie mini camp and vet mini camp, and before you know it, it's training camp. And so, there's not a whole lot of downtime in the NFL schedule now. A lot of people are always like, yo, what you do during the offseason? I'm like, we don't really have one like that no more. It's not like that. So you still going to stay pretty busy. Owners meetings come up. You get down to Florida. If you're going to go down to, Mobile for Senior Bowl or go to Indy for the combine, like it's never really a downtime in the sense of how it used to be. So I think that part of it is really cool. So just been staying busy, man, but trying to catch up on some regular life things that I kind of let fall by the wayside a little bit during football season.
It's good that you got some time to get back to that a little bit, but yeah, I'm sure it's a crazy hectic schedule. And I mean, I'm one of the biggest Bulls fans you'll ever talk to, but like I'm listening and looking at like who they're going to hire as offensive line coach instead of a team that's in season, that is a very popular team. And it just goes to show like how thirsty this fan base is and how much of a signal change this new direction kind of seems to where it seems like we're kind of shifting in a new direction. And I'm curious, with your ear to the floor and kind of boots on the ground there, like, do you feel that? Is there a sense of change? Is it led with Kevin Warren? I know, and also, right, was this the coach you thought they were going to get? Was this kind of how you thought it was going to play out with all these new changes?
Yeah, I think that you can kind of sense some of those changes, having just kind of new structure of leadership, having Kevin Warren in place, and seeing Ryan Poles being empowered to lead a coaching search. I didn't really believe that he had led a coaching search that landed on Matt Eberflus. By the time they hired him, they had a list of 3 finalists and say, choose one of these guys. That's not really allowing me to go on a coaching search. So I thought this was his first time to really get an opportunity to do that. And there's been a lot of questions about, okay, well, Kevin Warren's supposed to come here and make some sort of change. Like, what is it? I don't see the tangibles from that. And I think you're starting to see some of those things. You saw the Bears fire a head coach midseason for the first time in its history. They go through this coaching search. And there were just small things that you would kind of see in place as you were around that said, oh, this is a little bit different than what we've seen before. And we were joking, amongst the beat that just the food in the press box at Soldier Field was much different when Kevin Warren got there, because the food was bad. It was embarrassing. Even you get all these teams coming through from all around the NFL, and they're like, "This is what y'all eat on game day." It's like, yeah, like, and then you go to all the other stadiums, and it's like great spreads, great food, like people making hot food right in front of you, and it's like, here's like, you want an old chicken sandwich or something? Here, have at it. Like, so just
that
those
speaks
kind
volumes. That speaks a lot to what's going on there behind the scenes.
It's the small things, right? And so those type of small things you start to see just change a little bit. You start to see that you saw them expand the family room at Soldier Field for the players after the game. It's a small room. There's no way you can fit 53 guys or 46 guys family into that after a game, and so they were able to expand that, and they did it in a makeshift way, just kind of move it out into the hallway and put some curtains around it. But it was just the attention to the fact that something needed to be done. And so those types of small things you could kind of see. And I think now you're starting to see those things kind of be a little bit more tangible in terms of some of the things you see on the actual football side of it.
Yeah, I mean, those are just like little things, but it feels like this team's been around forever. To just finally be looking at those little things is super important. So, I mean, a lot of times Kevin Warren takes a beating, I think, from the fans.
Sure.
Their perspective is that he's just
Change is
the
hard.
man behind
Change
the
is hard.
scenes, and but those little things here and that. I mean, if he can get McCaskey's to open up the purse strings to change up the food, I mean, that says a lot about everything else that's going on, honestly.
And you see that play off when you talk about the coach, right? Like, so Ben Johnson was, considered by most the top candidate. I know Mike Vrabel went first, but, he has his history with the Patriots. There was no surprise there. But I think Ben Johnson was probably the most coveted coach this hiring cycle, and it was going to cost some coin to be able to get him. And usually the Bears like, no, we're not really opening up the wallet like that. And this time they were able to. And some of the numbers you hear, 13 million, 15 million, like the Bears doing that is indicative of some type of change. I asked Ryan Poles about that specifically during his press conference when they introduced Coach Johnson. Like, what was the conversation like with George McCaskey and ownership when you went to them and said, hey, we want Ben Johnson, here's what it's going to cost? And was there any pushback? He said, no, they told me I had their full support in terms of resources and whatever it was going to take. And that's a change. We all know that's a change. Anybody that's been following the Bears for any length of time, you understand that's a change. We've seen some things before where they went out and got, Khalil Mack or Jay Cutler. But for the most part, the Bears have been very, let's say, meticulous about how they, spend their money. And so
that's really handing over the keys to the car right there, right? I mean, if he's saying like first-time head coach, you want to give him more money than, I think some reports are saying more than Jim Harbaugh. Or John Harbaugh is making, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big bet on your general manager and Kevin Warren and everybody, that was involved in that process for sure. I think, it sounds like we don't really know what the exact dollar amount was, the length of the contract. They don't let that stuff come out. There's no leaks or anything. You don't have any insider information on that, or
I've heard two different numbers. I've heard 13 per, and then I've heard 15 per for about 6 years. So he's either at 6 for 78 or he's at 6 for 90. But either way, 13 puts him, like you said, above John Harbaugh, and then 15 puts him up there with Jim Harbaugh. And so, like, the Bears, you think they're usually coming around 7, 8, in terms of coaching money. And, that's a big step for them to go ahead and do that. And so I think it's good for them, not only in terms of the potential coach that Ben Johnson can be for them, but also for their reputation and for their perspective, how they're perceived around the league. Like, that has to start to change a little bit. And even when you talk about, the stadium negotiations and what's going to happen with that, and Arlington Heights, or, the museum campus, whatever, Lakefront campus. And it's like, well, I think that when you start to put more skin in the game, you show that you're willing to be, bigger spenders, and you're going to be on a different platform in terms of national notoriety, that gives you a little bit more cachet, even in negotiations, when you go and say, hey, this is going to be the hottest thing for the next 10 years. We got a young stud quarterback. We got the young, hottest new head coach. You want to be associated with this. You want us to bring this party to Arlington Heights every single week. And then that's what may lead them to be able to get some more footing in terms of negotiations on the tax dollars, because ultimately, and I know I'm jumping ahead here maybe, but ultimately I think that's where they're going to end up putting the stadium. The Bears are not a real estate company. They don't buy $200 million properties to flip them. That's not who they are. It's not what they do. Their business is football. And so once they bought it, and I think, again, that was the Bears being backwards, right? It's just like we talked about with Ryan Poles and hiring him after you had the finalists. You did the same thing to Kevin Warren, right? You went out and you bought this $200 million property, and then you hired him to say, hey, build this stadium for us, close this deal. Yeah. And it's like, okay. And he looks at the thing. He's like, wait a minute. We haven't settled on what the taxes are going to be with Arlington. And so Arlington's like, we don't have any motivation to budge. Y'all already bought it. So whatever. And now Kevin Warren has gone on, this whole campaign of trying to get back some leverage in these negotiations. And I think, this could be another thing that helps him in that process.
Yeah. All right. Here's the deal. I mean, we've been Bears fans our whole lives. We've had, what was it, 2006? They went to the Super Bowl one time in our lifetime, Evan. Right. We've won the offseason quite a few years. We've been praised that this is the right direction, the new hot coach, the new mind, the new structure is in place. It's going to be different this time. I mean, we're still second guessing. I know Ben Johnson for Evan and I wasn't our top choice when we were looking at this. Obviously, we're wanting to buy in. We're fans as well of this team. We're hearing the storylines. We're seeing the reports of how this guy was the top talent, and for a reason, right? How is it different, man? Like, how is this going to be with the same owners? I mean, Kevin, you just spoke to Kevin Warren, so I take a lot of that into consideration. Is he kind of now the master that is kind of pulling the strings for the Chicago Bears and, going to the owners for when it's time to spend and just getting them to kind of give the green light? Like, how is this different? Are we going to be at the end of next year? I don't know, man. That was a tough season for Ben Johnson. Caleb didn't look good. He took another step back. Like, I want to believe, of course, I want to believe. Everybody wants to believe, but it's still the Chicago Bears, and they haven't done it in my lifetime to go and win a Super Bowl. How is this different? The food's different. How's it different?
I'm in the same boat as you, bro. Like they haven't won one in my lifetime, and so it's like I want to believe. Like I want to go all in, but I'm also like, the most I can give right now is cautious optimism. Like this is as high as I can go right now in terms of what I believe and whether this thing is going to work out. And I think only time will tell, man. I think everybody was so excited last year, and it was like, okay, we got Caleb and get the #1 pick, and it's going to be this, and it's going to be that, and it's going to be
playoffs.
This.
We're going playoffs, possibly Super Bowl.
We were going to go to playoffs, and we were going to make a run at this thing, right? And I was kind of like, yeah.
You still have Matt Eberflus as head coach.
Yeah, like there's still a lot of stuff going on around. And if you think all of that was just Justin's fault, then that's cool. If that's what you believe, then put your guy in here and then watch him get sacked 70 times. And tell me that Justin just held the ball too long. Like there's a lot of other stuff going on around here that has to be fixed. And so, just like everybody was excited about Caleb last year, now everybody's going to be excited about Coach Johnson this year. And I get it. And I'm not trying to, throw water on anybody's, party, but it's just like, I'm taking a wait and see approach now. I don't know that it's different. Like, I can't sit here and tell you like, oh, I think it's so much different. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. I like Ryan Poles. I believe in some of the things that he's done, but I could also list his mistakes too, right? I can also talk about him trying to build this offense backwards. I asked him specifically about him building this offense backwards and surrounding Caleb with weapons, but not elite talent up front. He says he thinks he has the resources in this offseason to be able to flip that offensive line. I agree with him. They have the cap space. They have the draft capital. Can you evaluate, and then will you pull the trigger when those players are available? There have been some mistakes made during his tenure, and mistakes cost, man. You don't get to just flush mistakes and act like, mistakes cost. You don't get to just flush them and say, oh, it's cool, we move on. Sure, you got to move on, but those mistakes are going to cost you. You're going to continue to see Jalen Carter develop into a perennial all-pro difference making, dominating
I hate
interior
that one.
tackle.
I hate that one.
You're going to
Super
continue
Bowl
to see
Sunday,
that.
primetime player in the Super Bowl.
I think they need to flip 4 of their offensive linemen, and the only one I think is cool is Darnell Wright. So maybe you look back and say, well, we wouldn't even have Darnell Wright if we didn't do that. That's cool, but we also knew what Jalen Carter was coming into the NFL. Now, the tragedy that happened and losing life, and kids overdoing it and racing cars. We were all 22-year-old kids before, and we were all driving faster than we should have driven. And you talking about national championship and all that, cool, like.
The excuse I don't like with it all, Herb, is that the Bears locker room wasn't good enough.
Wasn't ready for that person.
The coaching staff,
which I always praise
room
y'all
wasn't
coaching.
ready, which is probably right, but it's NFL, right? It's the NFL. You got to have that system built. Man. If you don't have that system built in there, then you're going to lose perennially because you don't have a system anyways that can handle different types of players. You can't just fit everyone into this mold, right?
So, we hear it, Evan. They had a great locker room last year. The guys loved each other, real strong support. Winning game. Yeah. Won 5 games.
Yeah.
Listen,
10-game losing streak, but they enjoyed it, man. They had a good time. Nobody was pushed to their limits. Nobody was uncomfortable, right? There's no Jalen Carter personality in that locker room. No one had to worry about that. 5 games.
Yeah, not winning games, right? Like, you can have all the nicest dudes in the world. Since the time that I've been covering the team, I agree with him. They have a nice group of guys. They're like the cool dudes, all of them. Like, for the most part, there's a couple is like, this dude is weird. I don't like this dude, but for the most part, cool dudes. And it's like, okay, well, can they ball? Like, and I don't mean like
kind of important.
Yeah, it matters, right? It's kind of a thing. And I mean ball on elite NFL level. Now, all them dudes is in the NFL. Everybody that's on the Bears team and everybody else on any other roster, really good football players, right? But there's levels to it. And we talking about trying to ascend to the top of the NFL, you got to have dudes. You can't just have some guys. Like, you got to have some difference makers. And all of those guys, all those difference makers don't have to be the nicest people. They really don't have to be the nicest people.
It's hard, I think, to find superstars, right? It seems like at that level that aren't, divas at times or have a big personality, or, you think about like Travis Kelce pushing his coach sometimes, or, people getting in each other's faces and stuff like that. That happens. There's very rare, I think, that you're going to find players that aren't intense in moments, because they're multipliers, like Poles has talked about, right? Those are the guys that you want to find.
It makes me wonder too, is Ben Johnson gonna have, I mean, I've heard his agent's been like everywhere. I forget his name, it's escaping me right now, but he's been like on every radio station and every like hit piece, and it's very transparent from what he's saying that Ben Johnson was pretty much guaranteed a say in roster build, right? And how this team is going to be built and the type of players that he's going to want for his schemes on offensive and defensive ends. So is that what you're hearing as well? Is he going to have a lot of control of who is on this roster? And if that is the case, right, we start looking at the coaching staff that he's compiling, Dennis Allen, Antoine Randall, we got the kid from Denver, I forget, Doyle. Yeah. Right? Like, what kind of players are we going to look at getting added to this roster? And then maybe what kind of players are we going to be waving goodbye to because they no longer fit? And my one pause there is, I remember when we got a new coach and he wanted to have players fit into his system. And we said, see you later to Greg Olsen, who's an all-time tight end, because he couldn't fit the system. So I'm a little hesitant to finding players that fit the system instead of just finding players, like we said, that could just play ball. But are you hearing that? Is Ben Johnson going to have a lot of control? And then how are we seeing this roster shape up with this new coaching staff?
So, officially, I haven't necessarily heard, how that's going to work out. But to me, it just makes a lot of sense to just kind of have a cooperative approach to how you go about player acquisition, especially when you bring in a new coach, especially when you're going to pay him top dollar. Like, why wouldn't you give him some voice? I'm not saying he gets, 51%. But he should have some input on what type of players that you're trying to bring in here to build what you're trying to build, right? Like Coach Parcells, famously said a long time ago, like, don't ask me to cook the meal if you're not going to let me buy the groceries. You know what I mean? Like, so I think, some of that has to come into effect in terms of giving him some input. That being said, I think it should always be Ryan Poe's final decision, right? You want to, first of all, I want to know who we can talk to about these decisions, right? We all kind of like, no. Who gets 51%? And so, yeah, he should definitely have some input. I think it would be foolish for him to not have input. How much? I don't know about that, but he should definitely be able to have input. But in a ideal situation, they would have some synergy about what it is they're trying to build, right? And what type of guys fit that. What I appreciate about one of the things that he said in his introductory press conference, being Ben Johnson, was that he is more about the business of building a system around the players that he has, not so much trying to make these players fit his system. And I think for me, that's always the greatest, the best evaluation of any coach. How do you adjust and tailor what you want to do around what the Bears players are best able to do? And to me, that'll be the best sign that he's a good coach or not, right? So if you don't have 3 Pro Bowl offensive linemen that you brought with you from Detroit, then maybe you can't do all of those things. And so to come in here and just drop the Lions playbook in the offensive meeting room would have been foolish. And he says, I'm not here to do that. We're going to build this thing. We're going to tear it down to the studs. And we're going to build it up based around what Caleb and the rest of these guys can do. And I think that's the way to go about it. And then you just look at your roster and see, well, where do we need better players? And I don't, whatever, this type of player, that type of player. Where do we need better players? And as far as the offense goes, I think they can upgrade at 4 offensive line positions. I don't dislike Braxton Jones at left tackle. I think he can be serviceable, but I thought serviceable in the way that like Charles Leno was serviceable, right? Dependable, can show up, can play for you, got the absolute most out of what he had. I think if Braxton Jones never plays another down for the Bears, it was a win, right? As a starter, I think it was a win. You got a 5th round rookie out of Southern Utah, and he's 3-4 year starter. Like that's a win for Ryan Poles. But you can upgrade.
But they were trying to hope for a leap out of him too. But it's like you kind of already got pretty close to his ceiling right off the bat. So I agree. He would be a great
drafted
swing tackle or something. And
Amagaji.
I'm curious about DeAndre Swift because he was with the Lions and now he's with us, right? So Ben's coming back to Swift, and I don't know if that he didn't necessarily work with the Lions, but they made a conscious decision to get rid of him and draft somebody really highly. So what do you think that means for Swift? Is he going to be a backup to somebody? Are they going to be looking to draft somebody probably? And could
our group chat saying running back round 1?
People are talking about Gianti maybe being a potential pick. I think that's way too much of a I don't know.
It's a luxury the Bears don't have.
Luxury pick, exactly. But they'll probably draft a running back. Do you think, or no?
I think the Bears will probably draft a running back every year. I think that's probably good practice. That 4 to 6 round range, just draft a running back. A lot of people were very critical of DeAndre Swift this season. I wasn't. Just watching him run, I didn't see a guy that was running soft. I didn't see a guy that was avoiding contact. Did he go down with some, one-on-one tackles that maybe like to see him break in terms of contact balance? Sure, but I also saw him, get out into space and make some explosive runs and do some things out of the passing game. And so I wasn't as down on him as some people were. I also understood that you can't have, like, on the one hand, we're having this conversation about Caleb, and they're like, well, the offensive line is terrible. Okay, well, guess who's running behind that same group? Like you can't have it both ways. And so, I think DeAndre Swift is a talented back. I think he has a unique skill set that you should be able to use if you are a coach that's looking to build a system around what your players do well. Do you want to bring in more talent? Sure. I think that, you want to have 2-3 good backs in the league now if you can. And, Roschon Johnson, I don't know what his role is going to be in this system. I know people were extremely high on him coming out, and no knock to Roschon Johnson. I think he's a fine football player, but I just didn't understand that in the first place. Like, he's a backup. Bijan's getting most of the carries, and people were talking about he was going to be listed on the Mount Rushmore of Bears backs with Gale Sayers and Sweetness and Matt Forte. It's like, whoa, wait a minute,
Yeah.
like cool out a little bit. And I don't know. I hope the kid has a great career, but I can certainly see them improving that room, whether DeAndre Swift and Roshan Johnson are both there or not. So I think, certainly want to add some talent to that room and just continue to be dynamic. You've seen what the Eagles are doing right now. They've walked to the Super Bowl behind a dominating run game.
Mm. And I think too, like, yeah, you look at the teams obviously that are in the Super Bowl, their coaching staffs are legit, right? Like former head coaches on defensive coordinators, I think on both sides of the teams here. OC, former coach, obviously Matt Nagy, and then Kellen Moore, who was pretty hot name coming out of Dallas, now in Philly. So let's look at the Bears then, right? They get Dennis Allen, former head coach. I like the signing. I think a lot of people do as well. I especially like it because he was a former head coach with first year head coach Ben Johnson. The one that really scares me, but everyone's talking me into it and talking themselves into it, is Declan Doyle. I mean, the guy's not even 30, right? And like, doesn't matter. He's the young guy that has no life besides football, that's going to grind tape and do all the like dirty work for Ben Johnson, right, to get him ready for the games. He's a tight ends coach, so that again, we're looking at, is Cole Kmet ever going to become who everyone wants Cole Kmet to be? So looking at and then we got Antoine Randall coming in. Antoine, I worked at Thornton for a couple of years before moving out to West Coast. So Ty Streets, Antoine Randall, those guys are like big names in the rafters there.
Sure.
Coming home to Chicago, like that's a big signing in my mind. I think a former player as well with Super Bowl experience is something players always like to see and have around the team. Like winners produce winners. But like we've had this conversation in this debate, and this is a long tangent to one question. How is this coaching staff going to get the most out of these players? And like, what player do you think has the potential to take a leap because of good, hard coaching? Is it a Cole Kmet with Declan Doyle, who's the tight ends coach, and he's finally got this offensive mind with Ben Johnson, who had, Sam Laporta, and before him had the guy in Minnesota, his name's escaped me. Hawkinson, right? Like, is it him? Are we going to see some of our defensive line talent with Dennis Allen finally come to fruition, like a George Pickens that we've been waiting on to really, really step in the own, even though PFF said he had a great year, right? But are we going to see some of these people start absolutely making a name for themselves, or are we going to continue to look at other rosters of players we could have drafted that are outperforming their draft position because of good coaching?
I'll start with the Declan Doyle piece. A lot of people are really feeling a way about it. And it doesn't matter. Like, not to disrespect him, it just doesn't matter. This is Ben Johnson's offense. He's going to call the plays. Whomever he thought would be a great person for him to work with and do the things behind the scenes that he needs to get done, that's who should have been there. Anybody that was expecting this offensive coordinator in name only to be some big proven offensive group, why would somebody that love that elk take that job, right? Like, it's not your offense. You aren't calling the plays. You're basically an assistant OC. And if Coach Johnson thinks that Coach Doyle is a guy who he can lean on to help him do the things he wants to do, then great for Coach Doyle. You know what I mean? I wish we had a chance to talk to just the Bears structure. You talk to the offensive coordinator every week. With Antoine Randall being the assistant or associate head coach, I wish we could talk to him once a week instead of having to talk to Declan Doyle. But that's just my own thing. So that's not really a big deal to me. Clearly people think highly of the kid. He's, like you said, 28. And so
it's wild.
Yes, that's very wild to be OC at 28. So good for him.
I think
man.
McVay was the same age. I think that's what everyone kind of draws it to. It was like this guy in Washington, McVay, 28, same kind of quick trajectory, just absolutely grinder, eats, sleep, and drinks ball. But
I don't know how he elevates from assistant OC. I don't know. Like, the Bears put up 40 a game this year. Nobody's gonna be like, yo, Declan Doyle led the Bears to put up 40 this year. So I don't, you know what I mean? I don't know how but whatever. Good for him. As far as the players being able to take a jump, I look at players like Kyler Gordon. I look at how Coach Allen moves his players around, right, and use them in a little bit more exotic ways than maybe we're used to seeing here with the Chicago Bears. We've had good defenses, in my opinion, but vanilla ones that don't do a whole lot. They master their system, they play it, they challenge you to take the long, slow road. I think Dennis Allen's going to be a little bit more creative in how he goes about, utilizing his players on defense. And I think that Kyler Gordon is a type of player that you can use in so many ways. I mean, you can use him in press coverage, man to man. He can play outside. He can play inside. You can blitz him off the edge. You can use him in run support. He's just a very, very good football player. He's extremely athletic, quick twitch guy that can play in the middle of the field. He's got the toughness to be able to do that. And so I'm very interested to see how he uses him and also how he deploys Jalen Johnson, right? Is he going to allow Jalen Johnson to follow guys all over the field when you talk about going against some of these number one receivers, Justin Jefferson or Amon-Ra St. Brown? I don't know that I love the matchup with St. Brown as much as I do Justin Jefferson. I know that may sound weird considering Justin Jefferson's, in my opinion, is the best receiver in the league. But just matchup-wise, I would like to see Jalen shadow Jet all game long. And I think that Dennis Allen would be more willing to do that than we've seen in previous regimes. And so I'm just interested to see how he kind of deploys some of the weapons that I think he has on defense. I think this defense is still pretty good and in position to be, a top 10 defense if they can play at their best. They got to add to that defensive line, no doubt, like you were saying, Evan. But I think if they can do that, then I think they can have a pretty good chance to be a really good defense. I still like the back seven.
Any concern with Dennis Allen and Ben Johnson kind of butting heads have they ever coached together before? What do you think that dynamic's going to look like? Dennis Allen's just coming off being a head coach, and you got a guy that's just ascending to be a head coach. Big age gap in between the two. I mean, it's the NFL professionals. Like maybe that's the answer to the question. But how much do you know about Dennis Allen? And because he's kind of known, I think, and was last year by a lot of people that outsiders. I mean, I didn't watch a lot of Saints games. Don't get me wrong, but I did see a lot of clips of Dennis Allen, in press conferences, and he was horrible. He was a terrible head coach from that perspective, at the very least. And then they didn't win many games either. So It's like, this guy is not a head coach. Absolutely not. Some of the defensive metrics from when he was a DC look pretty good. But outside of that, I don't really know. Just personality wise, seems like maybe that him and Ben are a little bit different. I'm just curious what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I think that it's worth examining that he hasn't coached with any of his three coordinators before. I think it's a reasonable thing to be like, But as far as him and Dennis Allen go, I think it could be one of those things that opposites attract, and I think it could work well. I think having Dennis Allen in place will allow or afford Coach Johnson the opportunity to build that offense, spend as much time as he wants to or needs to with Caleb in that offense, and trust that Coach Allen is doing what needs to be done with that defense. Now, I don't want him to be some hands-off coach. Like, I don't know what's going on defense. Like, I don't want Coach Johnson to be like that. But I think having a veteran coach who understands this league, who understands defenses, and how to go about utilizing his, I think that gives Coach Johnson a level of comfort. And having a veteran coach who can handle the room is very, very important. It's going to be important for him on decisions. He's going to be doing all these things for the very first time. A lot of these things he's going to be doing for the very first time. And having somebody who's done it before should be of some help to him. And I hope they can find a good working relationship that allows them to balance each other out. Because I think that if it can, then it should work pretty well. Just I think they have that kind of different dynamic. As far as Coach Allen goes, he's had 2 opportunities now at head coach, and I don't think he's going to get a third. And so to me, his ego should not be in it. Like, he shouldn't have this ego involved to say, hey, I should be, sir, you've had a couple times. Go be the best DC you can be, and let's go get this thing rolling. So I don't think his ego should come into play. And obviously, whenever they had their conversations and interview, Coach Johnson felt good enough about it to bring him on his staff. So hopefully that thing works out. I also like that they retained Coach Hightower as special teams coordinator. I think that's really important. He's a guy who knows that locker room. He knows that roster. Special teams coordinators, they get overlooked for head coaching jobs, man. But I really wish they wouldn't, because they're the only people on the roster who really get to work with the entirety of the roster, right? Mm-hmm. He works with, the second unit, the third unit. He understands, okay, well, the first string, linebacker just went down in the second quarter. What does that mean for my special teams unit? Because now the second team linebacker's got to go there, and he's my L3 on kickoff. And like, how does all that work together? And so, they have so much knowledge of the roster, and they work together with all these players. I was saying, like, last year when Coach Thomas Brown was elevated to interim head coach, I said, I'm willing to bet you he's never had a conversation with Jack Sanborn, right?
Yeah.
He was the passing game coordinator. Like, I'm willing to bet you he never had a conversation with Jack Sanborn. And now he's in front of the room like he's the guy. And so these special teams coordinators, they have relationships with all these guys. And Jack Sanborn plays special teams, like just that type of stuff. So I'm glad they brought back Coach Hightower as well.
That's a great point. You see that once in a while when coaches get fired midseason, the special teams guy gets elevated. Can our special teams coordinator find somebody that can catch a punt this year, though? That's what I'm curious about.
And I also want to, does that mean Cairo Santos is gone? Because then it would tell me that it wasn't necessarily Hightower's fault that these kicks were blocked, and it was just our kicker had a horrible trajectory on his balls.
I think
anyways,
I think that it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, though. Like, you got to have a plan in place for what your players do.
Yeah.
Cairo is a very accurate kicker, and in my opinion, dependable, but he has a low trajectory. He doesn't have a big leg. He's not going to hit it from 63, right? But if you know that, then why in the hell would you not use the extra 36 seconds to get 5-10 more yards? Like, what are we doing?
Still goes to head coaching for you.
Yeah, like what are we doing? What are we doing? And so,
Are there any other names you're hearing? I know there's still a ton of positions. I think most Bears fans are looking at who's going to get hired for offensive line coach. I think there's a spam or a troll job yesterday on social media that Olin Kreutz was going to go and be considered for that. And then also with the defensive line, right? Yeah. And then also the defensive line. Traded for Montez Sweat, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. Had a real down season. I think our D-line just could not get to the quarterback. It was so frustrating watching games. Like, what is happening? There's no pass rush. There's no, gaps being closed down by the defensive line. So any names on those two positions? Because I think those are pretty valuable. And my personal philosophy is you always start with the line and build your way out.
Yeah, no, I think it's really, really important, those two hires, but I don't know. I don't have a list of names for you. I'm like, I hear them and then I'm like, whatever. When they'll pick one and then we'll see, right? And then we'll evaluate it on its own merit. I was the same way with the head coach. Like, I knew who the candidates were and who they were interviewing. I was like, oh, they'll pick one and then we'll see.
Who was your number one?
I didn't have one.
You didn't have a number one option?
That's why Herb's the best in the business, honestly, because Herb, you towed the line, man. You really do. With all your questions, they're so pointed. You just want to get the information, and you're not putting your own personal opinion and stuff. And I know you guys just brought on Nick Moriano too from at the Bigs.
Yeah,
heard him. Yeah, shout out to Nick. We've had Nick on the show too. He's great. He's the same kind of way, man. He just wants to put the information out there, and that's why at the Bigs you guys are doing that. And I think if people aren't following the Bigs, they better follow them because you guys are doing big things. Any goals for the Bigs upcoming in the next year?
Just to continue to get better, continue to find more creative ways to cover all the teams that we cover. Shout out to Drew Stevens, does a great job with the Bulls beat, and Gene does the Cubs beat, and Terrence on the Sox mercifully. Like this, that's jeez. But yeah, so we just want to continue to find more creative ways to put out engaging content that the fans appreciate and remain authentic to who we are and how we want to go about covering it. And so it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be a small part of what we do at the Bigs. A great team, great family, very collaborative effort for everything that we do. And I really, really enjoy and appreciate the opportunity to be able to, cover who's been my favorite team my whole life in the Chicago Bears, and to be able to cover them with a group of people that I truly respect and love and appreciate. So that part of it is dope. What were we just saying, though? Because I did have a point for what we was just talking about right before that.
We were talking about coaches have an impact, offensive and defensive line coach, building the team from the inside out.
Oh,
if you had a choice, a preference.
And then your top head coach.
Yeah, so like I just kind of stay away from that, but they do need somebody who can come in and get the most out of those people. Because like I figured that Ben Johnson was the top candidate in the pool, but in terms of me having a preference, I'd have been great with Aaron Glenn or Mike Vrabel or Brian Flores or like just get the right guy, right? Just get the right. It's such a hard thing to do. When you look around the league, and I think to me, there's probably only like a 33% success rate in terms of getting the head coaches right. You look around the league and say, okay, this top third of the league, they got good head coaches. There's a middle third. It's like, okay, they're okay, and they may be in contention. And then the bottom third, they're always in
Trying it
potential
out.
to be like firing, like, oh, he's on the hot seat or not. So like, it's just you never really know. I think the success rate isn't more than 33%. So I didn't think the Bears had a better than 25% chance of getting it right in the first place. That being said, though, whoever they bring in, they got to be able to one, utilize Montez Sweat in a way that allows him to continue to be a multiplier. I thought it was huge when Billings went down. That hurt them a lot. Because I think you talk about Billings, TJ Edwards, and then Jaquan Brisker also missing all the time that he missed. That really decimated their run defense. And then you can't stop the run. You can't stop the pass either. Now, what was so bad about them? They were giving it up on third down, third and long, third and 9, third and 13, third and 17, like stuff you shouldn't be giving up. They were giving up. And so I think that was as big a problem as anything.
Yeah. Well, absolutely, Herb. Thanks so much for coming on. One last question before we get you out of here. What should Bears fans expect for this upcoming season? I think the bar was set way too high last year. We had Hard Knocks, I think always pumps everybody up before the season starts. And people were thinking playoffs right off the bat with a rookie QB. Now we got a second-year QB. It's going to be his first year in a new offense. We got a young head coach, a still young GM. This is a very much a youth movement. Declan Doyle's only 28. I mean, just everything across the board. Should we be looking 2-3 years out? What do you think about next season?
Yeah, I think that, we heard Coach Johnson say they think they can turn this thing around right now. They're trying to win right now. And that's great. And I do think it's possible, right? We see teams go worst to first in this league all the time. Yeah. It's going to take a monster offseason in terms of what they're able to do on both sides of that line of scrimmage. Can they flip the offensive line? Can they add to the defensive line in a way that makes them, able to, one, disrupt the other team's quarterback and protect their own at the same time? If they can do those things, then they'll have a chance to get to that level this year. But again, like I said before, mistakes cost, right? And so I thought the Bears could have been on a trajectory to be a legitimate Super Bowl contender in 2025. I thought that at the end of last season, at the end of the 23 season, I thought they could go from here and be legitimate Super Bowl contenders in 2025 if they do this, that, and the third. We don't have to go back to revisionist history. They didn't do what I thought this, that, and the third was. Cool, no problem. How do you go forward, though? Right. And if you aren't right about that, then it is going to cost you time. And you don't have time. Not when one of your biggest reasons for doing what you did after the 2023 season was we want to get on a rookie quarterback's contract and we're going to try to win this thing then. Okay, cool if that works. But now you've wasted his rookie year. Now he's got to learn a new system with a new head coach. You are not going to win a Super Bowl this year. How close can you get? Can you become a playoff team? Can you start to be a contender? And then does that window legitimately open for you in 2026 when you still have, 3 years of control over him? And if this season doesn't go that way, then you aren't going to be a contender in 26 either. And so now you're starting to get to that 4-5 year point. It's like, well, what the hell did we do all this for? And mistakes cost. You don't get to make them for free. And so everybody was like, hey, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I'm sorry for that noise going on. I sat in the wrong place. But you don't get to make those mistakes and not think they're going to cost you. They just are. And in my opinion, they were mistakes. And that's not to say that I don't like Caleb. It's not to say that Ben Johnson won't work out. But if you're going to go down the road, you're going to go down, then that thing has to work. And if it doesn't, it's going to cost you time. Not to say that it won't work out in the long haul, that they won't end up winning whenever they do. But this year, everything will have to go right for them to get to that point this year. And when you have a team that, in my opinion, I look around and I say, okay, you got 3 players making around $100 million. You got DJ, you got Montez, you got Jalen. That's a team that's trying to win now. You paying 3 dudes $100 million. You're trying to win right now. You're not trying to win 2-3 years from now. But now you're in a position where I don't know that you can win right now. And so, and if you do, it's gonna be an expensive offseason. You got to try and go out and see if the Chiefs are gonna let Trey out the door, and if they let him out the door, then you got to back up the Brinks truck, and now you got 4 players making that kind of money. And so, it's just a tough situation, but they could navigate it. Like I said, we've seen people go worse to first before, but it's gonna be a heck of a challenge for them.
Man, let's hope so. Let's finally hope so.
I'm hoping with everything in me. I want to cover a good team, man. Nobody wants to go in the locker room for 10 straight losses. It is a terrible experience, and you get tired of seeing those guys' faces like that, and they're feeling bad, and they're leaving it all out there on the field. But it's like, and you come in and asking the same, why did we lose this week? Well, it's the same reason we lost last week.
Let's hope for a change. I mean, they changed the food in the press box. Let's hope they change the product on the field. Thanks again to our guest today. He's Herb Howard. He is at Herb Howard 411. He covers the Chicago Bears for the Bigs Media. Check him out on all social media platforms. He's also the co-host of Herb and 2 on the podcast. He's a radio personality for WVON on iHeartRadio. Herb, man, appreciate it every time you come on the show. Really enjoy your insight. Really enjoy your perspective.
It's an absolute pleasure, man. Thank y'all so much for having me, truly.
Thanks a lot, Herb. All right. Thanks again to our guest, Herb Howard. Again, you can find him on Twitter at Herb Howard 411. For Dan Slook, I'm Evan Bierman, listening to the Domestic Draft Podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to rate the show. You can find us on Twitter at Domestic Draft, on Instagram at Domestic Draft Podcast. Our website is domesticdraft.com, and you can watch the show on YouTube. Just search up Domestic Draft and drop us a sub. Thanks again for listening. Cheers.
Cheers.